Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, July 11th, 2019. That's 7-Eleven, by the way, so I guess if you're going to use our morning intros to buy your lottery tickets, I guess make sure you buy them at 7-Eleven. That's not a plug for well, sure it is. It's a plug for 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven, send me a gigantic $1 million check, I guess, for the advertising. It happens to be 7-Eleven. Good morning, everybody. If you are in Philadelphia, you're probably there for Netroots Nation. If you're not, by the way, did you know that Netroots Nation was happening right there in that city? It might not be your city. Maybe you're just visiting by accident. Who knows? Good morning to everybody there who are probably, shuffling around on their way to early morning panels. I never really could understand that as a vacation choice. I often missed the 8 o'clock activities and 9 o'clock panels. I'm not usually a morning person. I can do this one here because this involves moving from one part of the house to the other. I can more or less manage that each day. And you've heard me, and longtime listeners have heard a number of times that I just barely make it to the microphone in time for, and sometimes not in time for, our 9 o'clock starting time. But if you've been up and had your breakfast the way we used to do things, I know Greg is going to be surprised to find out that I'm not that much of a morning person. I guess because we frequently, when we went to Netroots Nation back in the olden times, that was when the roosters would wake you up in the morning. I was something of an early riser. If there's one thing I am not, even more than I am not a morning person, it is I can sleep in a hotel person. I need to. I should. I sometimes wonder whether I would be better off just saving my money and wandering the streets, or at least the hallways of the hotel. But I pay my admission fee so that I can hang around without being rousted for loitering. But mostly I just lie around in hotels and say, I don't understand why I can't sleep. Or how come every time I check in, I'm so close to the elevators? I can ask not to be, but it doesn't often work out. And even if I'm not, somebody just hallway doors opening and closing. Forget it. Can't be done. So I would wake up early and go have breakfast. And then all of a sudden it would be 9 o'clock and time to go to these things. And I would either skip that first panel, or if Greg was on a 9 o'clock panel, then I'd let him go and I'd wander around for a while. I'm not good at sitting through the panels either. I very often would get up and move from one to another. And that's actually because, but even in the old days, I can't even imagine what it's like now with so many more panels. I would find, so many things going on at one time, and I wouldn't want to miss various panels. Then I knew some of the people on the panels, and I wanted to show up at their panels. So I hope you're having a good time, and I hope you're not as manic in your schedule planning as I am. If you're having breakfast, good morning. You should enjoy it, listen in. If you're interested in listening in later on podcast, there's always that option. And if you are a faithful listener and you are at Netroots Nation, you will be surrounded by thousands of people, thousands, literally, who would love this show, maybe, or at least the topics that we cover on this show, and don't even know it exists. So tell someone while you're there if you enjoy the program, and, hold them at knife point and make them listen. I think you're allowed to do that. All right. So what else is up today? Gosh, there's a lot. Jeffrey Epstein is still in the news. He may not even be the most ridiculous story circulating, but it's amazing how much is already coming out, or that has come out in the last couple of days, even though everyone has known that Jeffrey Epstein is a, what was the word again? Not pedophile, but the other one, but basically a pedophile. For years. So much so that, of course, we learned yesterday that his private island in the Virgin Islands, ironically enough, is known as Pedophile Island. And I thought, was it Grudging One, our friend via Twitter, who wondered aloud yesterday on the Twitter machine. Good point. How is it? It's so odd that alt-right types and Republicans alike all were drawn into the belief that the pedophilia was really happening in a pizza place. Comet Pizza is the place for you to be checking out the basement in search of finding, I guess, stopping the perpetrators of pedophilia in their tracks, and not Pedophile Island. So how somehow that didn't tip you off to where this stuff might be going on. But it's a lot harder, I guess, to get to Pedophile Island than it is to get to Comet Pizza in the middle of Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to get to Pedophile Island, the only way there, I guess, was private jet flights, and the only flight in was called the Lolita Express. So who really could have known? Is it really possible to have predicted that any of this stuff was possible? No, clearly not. Much more coming out about that. Much more coming out about his shady, shadowy past, too. I guess I think we're now at the point where we can pretty much say he was totally full of it when he was claiming that I only worked with billionaires in my hedge fund. Not only did we discuss the other day that there simply weren't enough billionaires in the United States to go around in order to fill out a practice like that, but I saw some other strange reporting yesterday, and maybe we'll get to the details of it later on, now they're, of course, digging up former business partners. Some of them are easy to find because they are in the middle of serving, have served 20 years in prison for financial fraud. And guess what? They're willing to talk because their belief is that they did the time for crimes that Epstein participated in and got away with. But one of the things that he didn't get away with, it's actually on the record at some point, somewhere along the line, someone's record, we'll dig it up for you here out of pocket this morning. Epstein had to plead guilty in 1993. And remember, this is in the middle of his rise to power and fame and fortune. This is 10, almost 11 years after he has hung out his shingle, claiming to handle only people who will give him at minimum, $1 billion and power of attorney over that money. In 1993, he pleads guilty to conspiracy to steal treasury checks out of residential mailboxes. He's stealing people's, Social Security checks from mailboxes. How do you find even the time to get involved in something like that when you're handling billion-dollar clients? 10 years into this, he's stealing checks out of mailboxes. Sounds very ritzy and billionaire-ish, doesn't it? I think he may be full of it. And I guess that'll come as no surprise. Of course he's full of it. Of course he's been lying about his net worth. Of course he's been lying about being a high roller. That's why we're still talking about Epstein, because he's so clearly and in so many ways a proxy for the guy you can't accuse of anything, except we never stop, Donald Trump. All right, there's more happening. This may be where we end up again today anyway, but Greg Dworkin is here. It's breakfast time. It's Netroot Nation Day. So where else would you be, right, Greg?
Exactly, and hello to everybody at Netroots Nation. If you happen to be listening, waiting for panels to start, or if you're listening later on in the day, that's great.
Yeah, what's up with this panel?
A reminder from Kevin Cruz, historian. This is a very short thread, but it's good. It actually covers some of the stuff we did yesterday. Remember, the Secretary of Labor, who's currently under fire for cutting a deal with an alleged pedophile and serial rapist, is only the Secretary of Labor because Trump's original nominee for Secretary of Labor had to withdraw over allegations that he had abused his ex-wife.
Yes.
We covered that yesterday, so we got that one. I'm just checking here, to make sure we didn't leave anything out. Next in the tweet thread, also remember that the 2016 RNC finance chairman who's been accused of multiple counts of rape is different than the 2016 RNC deputy finance chairman who paid for a playmate's abortion, who is different than the other 2016 RNC deputy finance chairman who's now in prison.
Right. All different guys.
Right? All different guys. Also, and this one we didn't talk about, the state chairman of Trump's 2016 campaign in Kentucky, who later pleaded guilty to child sex trafficking, is different than the state chairman of Trump's 2016 campaign in Oklahoma, who also later pleaded guilty to child sex trafficking.
Right.
So one gets the impression that the sex trafficking demo is probably 90% in favor of Trump.
You get that impression. And again, long-time listeners who are willing to be evangelists. Yes, who are willing to be evangelists among the uninitiated at Netroots Nation. You can tell them which podcast told you that Trump World was a sex cult a million years ago.
Right. So anyway, the word that you were looking for is ephebophilia. Ephebophilia is the primary sexual interest in mid to late adolescence, generally ages 15 to 19.
Yes.
And, depending upon how you act out, it's often a crime. The term was originally used in the late 19th to mid 20th century. This is from Wikipedia, and it's one of a number of sexual preferences across age groups subsumed under the technical term chronophilia.
Chronophilia, wow.
So if you have a predilection for a particular age group and you don't remember what the word is,
okay.
chronophilia is fine.
Like people who like to have sex with
in terms of shorthand, even though it's not technically correct, Pedophile Island works just great.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to pronounce and understand.
Same thing happened with Roy Moore. We had this discussion with Roy Moore.
It's weird.
Guy's a pedophile, even if technically, only one case.
Yeah. It's just all it takes is one.
The youngest, was 14. So that he was accused of improper attitude, and so it's not good. Something that cuts across party lines, right? I mean, hitting women.
I'm sure there has to be one somewhere.
Raping adult women.
Oh, okay.
This is stuff that the Republican Party says, I don't see it, I don't hear it, I won't speak it. But
but they do.
Trading, sex trafficking with children, that's not going to fly. That's one of those things that, there are very few lines left. That's one of the lines that's a little bit too far. And that's why I think Acosta is on very, very shaky ground in terms of sticking around. That's why he had his press conference yesterday. Trump said, I'm thinking of firing you. Do your,
best.
Your Kavanaugh television angry white guy thing, and let's see how you can do defiant.
Was he angry enough?
No. Oh. So that's why I think it didn't work.
Yeah, that could be.
No, he was lawyerly and not in a good way.
Oh. Well.
Right. I mean, I don't think he covered the things that he needed to cover, in other words. So there are some major questions that still
major
questions that still remain bigly questions. Popat, who is not everybody's favorite, nonetheless had a very nice little tweet thread about this. He said, "Dear Secretary Acosta, I do not believe we've spoken since graduation. I regret encountering you under these circumstances. I was not able to attend your press conference, but I do have some questions."
He does.
In 2008, that Mr. Epstein had a residence in New York and traveled to other jurisdictions, right? And you knew that it was conceivable that there could be an investigation of whether he committed federal crimes in other districts.
Yes.
Is this correct? He's asking. Acosta.
I can't answer. I don't have that authority.
Right. And in fact, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Epstein's attorneys were vigorously demanding a non-prosecution deal that would cover any federal prosecution in any federal district in the United States, right? Correct? That's the word he's using. They were elite, experienced lawyers, correct? And they knew, as any competent attorney would, that Mr. Epstein faced exposure in other districts if he conducted the alleged activities in those districts, right?
Seems reasonable.
So you knew when you approved this non-prosecution agreement, this is Acosta, that someday Mr. Epstein's lawyer might be arguing that it barred prosecution in another district. Remember, the whole thing here is that he got off the hook in Miami, but a sovereign district in New York is its own entity. In light of that, let's look at the agreement, and he gives a link.
Okay.
Now, you're very familiar with the sorts of agreements U.S. Attorney's Office makes with defendants, right? And you'd agree with me that federal prosecutors take great pains to be very specific and explicit and not ambiguous in their agreements with defendants. Do you view this non-prosecution agreement as specific and not ambiguous? I ask because of some of the terms of the agreement you approved seem to lend itself to an argument by Mr. Epstein, perhaps not a strong one, but an argument nonetheless, that the agreement is ambiguous about whether it applies outside your districts. For example, the agreement says that Epstein is seeking to, quote, resolve globally his state and federal criminal liability, end quote, without defining that, and speaks generally about the interests of the United States without limitation. So the agreement also says prosecution in this district will be deferred, and elsewhere it says Southern District of Florida is deferring prosecution, which probably means that Southern District of New York will prevail on this argument. Do any of these states have a Northern District?
Yes, some of them, but all the
why don't
crime
they
is
do
in the
anything?
South. Yeah, the Northern District is very prim and proper and operates textile mills.
I suppose.
The Southern Districts have slavery.
Yeah, something like that.
I think.
But on the other hand,
Yes.
the agreement says that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI have investigated, quote, any offenses that may have been committed by Epstein against the United States, end quote, without limitation by district.
Oh.
And the agreement contains a general promise by the U.S., not limited by district, not to prosecute Mr. Epstein's co-conspirators.
Wow.
Mr. Secretary, why doesn't the agreement have standard language specifically stating it only binds the office offering it? Why doesn't it have other language limiting what global means? You would agree that you were competent and knew what you were doing at the time, and the defense was competent and knew what it was doing. In light of that, this level of ambiguity was intentional, right? You'd agree with me, you didn't take any of the steps required by the U.S. Attorney's Manual to secure the approval of other districts to bind them, so you did not have the right to offer an agreement that bound other districts. And if you knew that Mr. Epstein's lawyers wanted a nationwide deal and knew that he might use this agreement as a defense to prosecution someday, why does this agreement have these ambiguities? I will return, sir, with further questions.
He probably
So
ignored.
the point of all of that is Acosta really seemed to be setting this up to get Epstein off the hook.
Yes.
And then having a press conference yesterday painting himself as the hero who stepped in when everybody else couldn't do anything, which is essentially what he did, just seems rather self-serving to me.
Yes, well, it seems like it's mostly wrong. And, yeah, I mean, he makes some good points. I'm sure that the ambiguity is baked in for a reason. I don't know whether, I didn't get to watch the press conference, and I didn't know whether it was worth doing, but I know that prior to the press conference, he's been asked about what the hell happened before in the by the not the transition team, but the so-called vetting team, I guess, that was checking him out for his nomination, and they did apparently just a very cursory vetting job for the extreme vetting team. That's for other people though.
But, in terms of cursory job,
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that underlies all of this
Yeah.
is Acosta was saying, I congratulate Southern District of New York given the new evidence that they're doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And that evidence was available at the time. Why didn't he pursue it? Why didn't he check? Or as Aaron Blake asks, the big question Acosta failed to answer, and chief among them is this, why did that decision have to be made right then and there? If the evidence wasn't there to be confident in a large-scale federal case, why not investigate further and uncover what federal prosecutors in New York revealed on Monday?
Yeah. Well, he has given an answer. I don't know if it's a good one, but apparently when he was going through the vetting process, they asked him point blank, is this Epstein thing going to come back to haunt us? Is this going to become a problem? Will members of the Senate find out what this is about and make things uncomfortable for us? And apparently he said, and this was in the Daily Beast article that was published yesterday, and I apparently little notice, which is hard for me to believe about Daily Beast articles that get circulated on Twitter. If I see them, how little notice could they be? They ask him this, is the Epstein case going to cause a problem for confirmation hearings? Acosta that's what they ask him. Acosta had explained breezily, apparently, and this might explain his unfamiliarity with the weirdness and ambiguity and details of the agreement. He explained that back in the day, he'd had just one meeting on the Epstein case, that he kind of was told, that we have this big case closing, come review this thing, as though, I guess, the other attorneys in the office were handling the case, and they asked him as a U.S. attorney, all right, will you sign off on this agreement? And he sort of half read it and said, okay. Now, there's also, of course, evidence on the record in statements he's given in other contexts where he talked about the extent to which he had met over a period of months with the opposing counsel and hashed this thing out. When he needs to be looking like he was totally involved, he says he had lots of meetings. When he needs to brush it off and get the new job. He says, I only had one meeting. And in addition, there's this weirdness. He says he'd cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys because he had, quote, been told, unquote, to back off. That could happen, right? But then there was this part, that Epstein was above his pay grade. Quote, he told his interviewers here, I was told Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence, unquote, and to leave it alone. He told his interviewers in the Trump transition, who evidently thought that was a sufficient answer and went ahead and hired Acosta. So that would have been maybe a good question for yesterday's, and it had appeared and was in print before yesterday's press conference, well before yesterday's press conference. Nobody had any questions about, say, Epstein apparently, Mr. Acosta, you said you had to sign on to this non-prosecution agreement because he was an intelligence asset. In what sense, and whose asset, and what country, for that matter, are we talking about here? Because this would now be, I guess, it's the second one I know of Trump associates involved in some big-time crime who have told prosecutors, oh yeah, you can't touch me, I'm a top international secret super spy, and the CIA says let me go. Yeah, so, that's a lot of those things.
We don't know that, but it would be irresponsible not to speculate.
Right.
Since everybody's speculating in the press.
Sure.
So it's just the whole thing is
a weird
bizarre.
one. Yes.
And his press
he may be
conference
lying his
doesn't
ass
explain
off.
any of that.
Yeah.
Now, you asked about Jeffrey Epstein's money because, now it's
lots of people
like Donald Trump.
That.
Maybe you don't really have as much money as you thought.
Right. I think maybe no.
Well, here's a piece in
he
Vox,
has it now.
which is kind of fascinating. What we know and what we don't about retail mogul Les Wexner's connection with Jeffrey Epstein. Les Wexner owns the group that owns Victoria's Secret and The Limited.
Yes.
And it turns out Les Wexner is Jeffrey Epstein's only known client.
Yeah. Like
nobody else knows.
Michael Cohen had secret clients and stuff.
Yeah. The only known client. And why was Les Wexner so interested in investing in Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, it's a good question. They have a very weird relationship. That $1 million, bazillion dollar mansion that they broke into that the FBI had to crowbar open the other day was sold to him by Wexner for $10, apparently, by the way. So good deal. And no one really knows why, but it was, and not only that, as a matter of fact, somebody I think investigated the actual, the deed, the transfer deed, $10 purchase price. And what's really interesting is, of course, I told you that Epstein's claims are that his clients have to give him $1 billion and power of attorney. And he in fact exercised the power of attorney on behalf of Wexner to approve the sale. He sold Wexner's mansion to himself for $10 using Wexner's power of attorney. And Wexner, sharp-elbowed businessman, all right. I don't know why, but he also, by the way, had a girl-sized safe in there with lots of pictures. Really sure what happened.
And Wexner, because he was associated with Victoria's Secret, has lots of models on his arm in various and sundry pictures, and we don't know anything about that.
So I don't know. I thought that was kind of an interesting development too. He's, I guess, I could amass large amounts of money too if I could just talk people into giving me. If I could talk billionaires into giving me power of attorney, I guess I'd be well off. It may be that his big skill is hypnotism.
What do you give the billionaires in return?
Maybe nothing. You can tell him you can stop clucking like a chicken now. Snap, 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 and that's what I would do. That's what I'd be doing. So maybe he's just one of those guys that can hypnotize you with their eyes and say, "Sign this." All right, I will.
Yeah, let me introduce you to my friend. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that is going to make the Acosta thing not go away, and that's not even the biggest story of the day. The biggest story of the day is Trump announcing, or at least Trump leaking to the press, that he's going to announce that he'll put the census question, citizenship question on the census by executive decision.
Yeah,
and,
executive something.
By executive order. And at the same time, he's doing this on a day where his aides are announcing that those ICE raids that have been delayed are going to happen, and at the same day that he's having a closed to the press social media conference with some of the bigger, more rabid right-wing white supremacist groups and individuals. Mm-hmm. This summit at the White House is to bolster his campaign, but right after that he's announcing the census citizenship question. So basically, today's one of those days where he's going white supremacist Stephen Miller full bore.
All right.
And, that certainly will distract for a moment from the Jeffrey Epstein connection with him.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if it's close to the press,
but it's a big story in and of itself.
Yeah. I guess it'll be interesting to see whether
it'll be interesting to see what the Marshal of the Supreme Court has to say about this.
Yes, go get them. They're all in the White House.
We'll go get the forms.
I don't know how well he'll be able to distract during the summit if it's closed to the press and all of his social media people are in there. It's very difficult to tweet from out of the White House if you're just a regular person. You're not supposed to be carrying your phones around. Sometimes they violate that protocol. But also I think they mostly jam the signals there, although I don't know how Trump is able to get his tweets out. But they must have managed to rig that for him somehow. So we'll see whether they're able to do it during the day, but certainly by mid-afternoon they should have a lot to say.
Right. Justice Putnam points out that Ian Reifowitz would call it racial priming.
Yes, true. And it's a topic he's discussed with us a number of times.
Last week,
and
that's because
yesterday,
that's what it is.
With Justice himself was also on his program prior to the Netroots Nation program beginning. So, yeah, good resource for all of this. And all right, well, we'll sit on our hands for 2 minutes. This is your opportunity to commit all the crimes, I guess, while we're not watching. And report back to us afterwards. We'll read you the news accounts of your criminal activities after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are still with Greg Dworkin, still on Epstein because that's the way it goes. There's much more to it. We could go on forever with it. We might not.
We probably will. We'll probably go on for the next year.
All right.
But not necessarily get all of that 1 year into today's show.
Right.
Jonathan Swan from Axios had commented that he thought this was a story with legs. Young legs at that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But, the whole idea there is that he called it industrial grade pedophilia.
Yeah. Well,
and it's not one of the things you can brush off as a single episode or, if you're talking about sex trafficking rings.
Yes,
that's
islands.
That's a position not even Republicans can support.
I thought not. We'll see. The day is young.
Right.
As are the victims.
Remember that the standard Republican response to something really horrific is, I haven't read that yet. I can't comment on it. I didn't see that tweet. I have fingers in my ears. I didn't read the Mueller report. Obviously it's because they don't want to. But the Epstein thing is so pervasive in media, you can't ignore. You can't say, who's Jeffrey Epstein? That's not going to fly.
Yeah, that's.
And it turns out, I'm not even talking about Republican office holders. Republican voters are not necessarily okay with this. Remember, Roy Moore lost.
True. And that was Alabama.
Roy Moore lost in a state that Republicans cannot lose.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because of his views on the Green New Deal.
No. Well, that wasn't out yet. But still, even so, yeah, I think people knew what that was about. And yet he's running again, so there is that.
And he's going to lose again. You think this is helping him?
I hope so. Yes.
No.
Look over there. That's worse. It's funny. It used to be the joke.
This is one of those. There were very few norms and lines left in terms of decency and standards. This is one of them.
Yeah. Well, he'll say, "Well, I wasn't a rich guy with a jet. It was just me being poor.
No,
and
actually,
a pedophile in my car."
Is going to be, I may have done X, Y, or Z, especially at the mall, but it's not like I was RNC finance chair.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would have been ridiculous. Yeah. I don't know. He's setting himself up for embarrassment again, or us. I don't know. We'll see what happens and what the Russians are up to. I don't think they're dabbling at the level of the Alabama Senate, but maybe they'll just go for it.
In any case, so we'll leave the Epstein thing and let that develop, let that percolate. But on the census question, I'm seeing some not very happy conservatives about this. Noah Rothman writing, defying the Supreme Court's directive would open a seal that no one should want to see broken. There's 7 of them, by the way. It betrays the administration's belief that it cannot satisfy the court's requests and threatens the legitimacy of the census. More importantly, it would be a legitimate constitutional crisis. And Brendan Nyhan, political scientist, says, we really need legal experts to help clarify issues on Trump and citizenship question today. Presidents have worked around legal constraints before. Obama did with DACA. They've circumvented unfavorable court decisions. What are precedents here? Too much uninformed hyperventilating. What does Rick Hasen think?
Okay.
It is a breaking story. I mean, he hasn't even announced it yet, so this is going to develop, and it'll be tomorrow's story as well.
Yes. Okay. So it'll hang around for a little while, and it's already not been a particularly good week for Speaker Pelosi, having to fend off everything from outright attacks to just open and lingering questions about. It seems like we're not doing the things we need to be doing to rein this president in, and lots of people. I guess the second most popular dodge behind we have to wait for the Mueller report was, well, talk to me when he defies a Supreme Court ruling. So, that's coming up.
Right. All right. Let's talk a little politics here as those other stories develop. This is a morning consult poll out today. It's midweek. And the latest morning consult poll of 2020 asks the Democratic primary in a slightly different way. Instead of asking early states or instead of asking overall, this one asks, how do you rank the current 57 people running among highly likely voters?
Oh, okay.
Those who are most likely to vote.
So a different model here. Okay.
Right? Biden 29. Harris 21, Warren 17, Sanders 12.
Yeah, all right. That's
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Of those most likely to vote, Biden still leads. And again, it's a reminder, Biden's doing a fight back thing. He's, as they say, left the Rose Garden strategy behind him.
Wow.
That didn't work. So he's going to be aggressive. I guess he's got a big foreign policy speech today, and some of his aides are going after Kamala Harris and some other folks. Whether that'll work for him or not remains to be seen. But the primary isn't over. It's just beginning.
Yes.
And he's apparently awoken from his decades-long stupor and is out there fighting for his candidacy. So we'll see how that goes. And at the moment, he still retains a lead.
Okay. Highly likely voters. Okay. I mean, that's not that much different than the results and ordering that we have gotten from
but it
regular
emphasizes
voters.
The fact that of those who were paying attention, the race is pretty close.
Yes. All right. So that sounds about right.
With Bernie in fourth.
Yeah. I wonder about our Sanders voters. Have they gotten any better or more willing to look up the registration rules and get themselves registered? Is that what's hurting them in the polls? I don't know.
Again, if you're going to play the game, you have to know the rules, and you got to play by the rules. And so, Obama showed Clinton that when it wasn't just about popular vote, it was delegate count.
Yeah, although I think Obama was largely responsible for not playing by the rules in that. In 2008, contest. He was, I think, one of the more egregious rule breakers, but what can you do? Well, that fight over the counting of the delegates, was it Michigan that
was a fun one.
had bifurcated its allocation because of the having moved? They were under sanction for having moved there.
All right, a better way
right?
of describing it is he understood the rules.
Rather
than
he understood that you could break
you
them and
get away
with
the delegate count, and that's what he went for. And I think he did a better job in
he did a better job in
small
managing
amounts,
it.
even when you lose, and build them up and get a bigger number at the end.
But with regard to Michigan, he managed it well and managed to talk the DNC into saying, to hell with the sanctions. And Clinton, in abiding by the decision that the DNC had made earlier, lost.
Yep.
So.
Anyway, are you recruiting extra voters who normally would not vote? If you are, then they won't be among the highly likely voters in your models, and yet still do well by you. So I think that's going to be the Sanders camp argument.
Okay.
And as we all know, if you're depending on people who don't normally vote, good luck. I hope you win.
Yes.
Because they don't usually vote, which is why they're the people that don't usually vote.
Yeah, I would be only slightly surprised to find out that some number of Sanders enthusiasts in particular spent the intervening 4 years not registering. Maybe purposely, maybe at a protest, maybe they didn't think he was going to run again, and then he did.
Speaking of which, I have to check and see if the Trump family ever straightened that little problem out.
Oh yeah, that's true. They never really did have their registration right. That's my second favorite Billy Bush videotape with Donald Trump is him wandering around attempting to vote in, I don't remember which year it was, maybe it was 2004 presidential election, having to go to 3 or 4 precincts before he found the one he was actually registered in.
Yeah.
Because he's such a genius.
So there's another interesting, and not in a good way, piece of information which was making the rounds this morning. I have to see if I can put my hands on it, but it was unfortunately about sexism.
Okay.
And the likelihood of voting for a woman, and not so good there. Let's see, Matt Grossman had that one.
Okay.
That's Grossman with 2 N's at the end, political scientist. Hostile sexism scale is strongly negatively related to support for Warren among Democrats in particular. Also negatively related to support for Harris, and positively related to support for Biden and Bernie. So if you're a sexist, you're going to vote for the guys.
Okay, that part I understand. Yeah, there's a lot of negatives in there.
Right. If you're a sexist, you don't want to vote for the women. You want to vote for the boys.
Understood.
And this is from a Monkey Cage article. New polling shows how much sexism is hurting the Democratic women running for president. More than a quarter of Democratic primary voters score higher than average on a hostile sexism scale.
Oh, no.
We knew this. We talked about the Avalanche study a couple of weeks ago. About 20% of Democrats felt like their neighbors would not vote for a woman, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And this is just confirmation in a different way of looking at it.
Okay.
Democratic voters' attitudes vary widely. This is not something Democrats should be proud of. It's just something that they should be aware of because it's another hurdle to jump over.
Yes.
You shouldn't climb hurdles. You should jump over hurdles. In a general election, people generally vote based on party loyalty, mostly setting aside any other biases, but that's not a factor in a primary, which leaves room for voters to make choices based on stereotypical beliefs about people based on sex, race, religion, and so on. Competence, other things.
Yeah.
Likability, or whether they're electable.
Other stupid
We wanted
stuff.
to know whether attitudes that can be measured as sexist, meaning beliefs that women are less capable than men and overly sensitive to slights, are influencing Democratic voters' choice about whether to support a female candidate. For instance, when Democrats worry about whether a candidate is electable, it's scare quotes about electable, whether others would vote for him or her against Donald Trump, are they actually voicing their own discomfort about voting for women? Do these voters in reality see female candidates as inferior to male alternatives? And then they describe how they did their research. And then, as they say, as you can see, levels of sexism appear to be heavily influence Democratic primary voters' candidate choices. Among the least sexist voters, Biden and Warren are neck and neck. Among the most sexist Democratic primary voters, Biden is preferred by as much as 4-1. That's very interesting. Warren support drops from nearly 30% among the least sexist voters to less than 10% among those who are most sexist. Harris drops from 15% to less than 5%. And in both cases, the top female candidates lose about 2/3 of their support as they move from the Democratic primary's least to most sexist voters. And the effect goes beyond Warren and Harris. The figure below shows all the candidates in the field in our analysis, 17 men and 6 women, Gabbard, Gillibrand, Harris, Klobuchar, Warren, and Marianne Williamson. Because there are more men than women in the field, even the least sexist Democratic primary voters are considering more male candidates. But as sexism increases, Democratic primary voters generally consider fewer female candidates. What might this mean in the general election? Possible that some Democratic voters who are not currently considering a female candidate might choose not to vote for a female Democratic presidential nominee, but sexist attitudes cost Republicans more votes than it gained them in the most recent midterm, as experiencing the first 2 years of Trump's presidency pushed less sexist Americans toward the Democratic Party in 2018. So while sexism may be a hurdle for candidates as they compete for the Democratic Party's nomination, it could help them win a general election campaign against Trump, and that's a simple explanation of why electability is silly.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because what you think is not electable actually may turn out to be an asset and not a detriment.
Okay. All right. Well, a lot of people are going to have to pin hopes to that one. And
right. You guys are socialists. Oh, you mean we actually prefer health care that covers everybody? That's not what I'm saying. Yeah, actually, that is what you're saying. You know what? That's a very popular position.
Yeah. Well,
it's a detriment. Only in your primary is it a detriment. Actually, in the general election, it's an asset. So you want to keep talking about health care? Do it.
Yeah.
You want to have a lawsuit that's going to take health care away from 20 million people?
They do.
How do you think that's going to affect the 2020 election?
Oh, yeah. Maybe I don't.
Socialism. Yeah?
Well,
okay.
That
you run with socialism. We'll run with you just took health care away from 20 million people. Let's see who wins.
Yes. Well, they're going to get that chance. And
apparently,
as nervous as they are about it.
Because, again, Supreme Court matters. It's the Supreme Court stupid, but it's also the other courts. And when you put hardcore conservatives on the courts, they tend to do things like say, this whole Obamacare thing got to go.
Yeah, I mean, that
may not survive all the way up to the Supreme Court, but you don't want to be in the position where that's your bet.
Right. I guess the further out in the districts they are, the less daily contact they have with Republican strategists and people, right? That's true, because they're out there where land votes.
What are you doing?
Right. The giant red swaths where land votes more than people. They have no idea that there are nervous Republicans in Washington who don't want to have to run on this.
Right. So I called the citizenship question part of what Ian Reifowitz would call racial priming. Mm-hmm. Mark Murray put some subtle twist on that. We've got lots of questions about Trump taking executive action on adding a citizenship question to the census. But here's our top one. Is pushing for it almost as valuable for Trump as getting it?
Yes.
I think it's a work program for lawyers. I don't see how he's getting it. As soon as he announces it, the lawsuits commence like 8 seconds afterwards, and then gets tied up, not in time to get it resolved in order to print the census. So it's not going to be on it. The question's going to be, does he get mileage out of it? And, of course, it's going to rev up his base. But, of course, the counter reaction is, and then you don't get anybody else. So Trump is clearly telegraphing to everybody that 2020, in his view, is going to be a base election. And he's going to do everything possible to get his base to come out. That's bad news for America, because the things that get his base riled up are things that are bad.
Also, his
base
is
like taking away 20 million people's health care, like putting citizenship questions on the census, like defying the marshal of the Supreme Court, but that gets his base because, look, he fights for us, even though what he's doing is horrible.
Yes. Well, that's one aspect of the of the census question is, riling up the base, saying I'm fighting for you, just against all odds. There's a parallel theory that says by continuing to focus as much attention on it or insisting from the president's platform, the old bully pulpit, as they say, that there will be such a question and immigrants must fear it. I'm not as convinced of the efficacy of that plan. The idea that talking it up makes immigrants say, forget it, I'm not responding to the census. But I can see it as an argument. I don't know how effective I think it will be in terms of getting immigrant community members day to day to say, oh yeah, remember that time that the president threatened us? Which one? Maybe it just sinks in overall and they say, I'm staying away from the census. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. It's not as clear as the plan to try and actually win in the courts, except we don't think that one will ultimately be successful. We just don't know how crazy the courts are in the end. So I don't know. Two parallel tracks there. But yeah, that was one of the major points right after the first census decision from out of the Supreme Court was that there's no way of constraining the president. This is once it was remanded down to the district courts, and the lawyers were asking the district court, give us some sort of protection, some kind of injunction against the president lying about what he's doing and whether or not there's going to be a question just to intimidate people. And the judges said, I don't know if I have the authority to order the president not to say something in particular. And we're back where we started in terms of to hell with the law.
Right. Well, you can't order him not to say something, but once he says it, you can then say, okay, well, that won't fly.
Yeah, well, you can say, right. I mean, they're trying to figure out, can we force him to retract it? Can we force there to be some sort of disclaimer be printed alongside it? Not sure what you can do, what you can get away with. You can yell at him. You can talk about sanctioning his lawyers, but not him. So who knows? It's one of those difficult things. But what do you do with a crazy person who thinks they're president?
Well, but you can do things like say, it's really hard to speculate hypotheticals. But once you say you're putting the census question on the citizenship question on the census, we can say, no, you can't. That's not ambiguous.
Yes.
Now, we can't predict what else you're going to do and what you're going to do next and in advance tell you that you can't do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
But once you've done something, you could say, okay, well, you can't do that.
Right. I guess then it's just a question of what gets more attention and does it matter? The president's proclamation as a president in a suit and tie on television who says, yes, it is going to be on there, or, well, we also were issued
No,
this
what matters
written
is when you
denial.
get it in the mail, is it on there?
Yeah, I guess so. That is ultimately what matters. I guess, although, there's so many examples of things like that happening. Well, not necessarily at the census, but
Now,
I wouldn't
again,
be surprised.
I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on the internet.
Yeah.
But clearly the ambiguities do matter. They mattered in the emolument suit that was dismissed.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
there
what
were
do you
two
mean?
aspects of D.C. and Maryland bringing suit against the president about his hotel.
Yes.
And they said, it's the president's hotel and he's getting money from it, and that's stealing business from us.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, what was it, the circuit or the district
Circuit
level?
courts, Fourth Circuit Court, I think.
Said, look, there's two issues here. The major issue is that we don't think you have standing to do this.
Of course not.
But the bigger issue underneath is we have doubts that you would win the case for the following reason. You claim that because it's President Trump's hotel, he's stealing your business. How do you know that? How can you show that? How do you know that because it's Trump and everybody hates him, it's losing business?
True. I mean,
you can't show that. If you can't show that, how do you expect us to rule on it? What do you expect us to do about it? What kind of remedy do you think is judicially available to us? It's not an unreasonable argument.
No, not unreasonable.
Unreasonable, I don't mean
would,
legally. Unreasonable, I think it's reasonable in the sense that people can understand that.
Yes, right. Well, and it'll probably stand. I don't know. I mean, I think a more Well, a court that was more favorably inclined to testing the question could also say, well, a reasonable answer is, let me show you.
Let's look at the books.
Yeah.
Let's do discovery.
Right. And what sort of remedy is there? He has
Stop
to
doing it.
sever his ties to the business.
Right.
Period. Like he said he was going to and didn't. Like every other president has done.
Right. So I'm not saying it was decided correctly. I'm saying sometimes the ambiguities are, you can understand them.
Yeah.
You can understand where the issues are.
Right.
With the census, I don't get it. I mean, it's either on it or it's not on it.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I guess one of the arguments that the plaintiffs' counsel in the census thing was saying is, we have essentially an out of control, unaccountable president who is just going to say the opposite of what happened, and we're not sure how to stop it or deal with the fact that he's going to be lying. Ordinarily, you would say, so let him lie. Who cares? We'll keep telling people what the truth is. But when the lying party has got the platform of the presidency to do it, and the answer is always, written statements released from some court somewhere that may or may not get attention in the 10 seconds that the news spends on things, it's a problem. But all they're doing is exposing, this is the hacking of our current modern media, and they're not equipped to deal with this. And
this is true.
Sorry, they're not. And the court there will say, that might be one of those tragedies we have to let go.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. This, and then just to complete the remaining a story with legs that isn't going away is, of course, baby jails, and not just in Texas, but also in Arizona. And the treatment of them appears to be coordinated and deliberate, not just a matter of overcrowding. So if you turn detention centers that are supposed to be for 72 hours into Abu Ghraib, that's bad. And that's what seems to be happening. And that's a story that's not going to go away either. Jacob Soboroff and MSNBC have been on that one. And again, that and Epstein are certainly not going to go away, even as, at least for today, I'm guessing the census question is going to be the top story.
Yeah, maybe. The detention center is also another angle on that. Apparently, various of the limitations supposedly put in place on the detention capacity and the number of centers that could be opened and the appropriations for those centers. Apparently, ICE is building them out and opening them in far in excess of the limitations supposedly put on them in the deal that was reached to end the government shutdown. So once again, we may have been left holding the bag on our deal with the Trump administration.
Yep.
But I'm not
anyway, that's my segment for today, and that's your first hour. So
all right,
figure out what to do in the next hour.
Yes, that's up to you. Maybe you're a late riser. Maybe you're in a different time zone, and it's time for breakfast for you. Good morning to those of you rising.
Breakfast is always relevant.
Yep.
No reason why you can't have it at
you can have it
10
again.
a.m.
That's
Eastern
true.
time.
Second breakfast, if you like.
Or third.
Right. I'm not going to be the one judging you. I'm going to be the one asking, what are we having?
Right. I mean, hobbits had second breakfast, but
right.
Who knows what dwarves had?
No one knows for sure. All right. Thanks very much, Greg. Let's see. That leads us into the weekend for you. Your weekend begins already, and we'll be back Monday.
I like the schedule, and I'll be back Monday with you, and we'll talk
myself. Then. Yeah, I should have some summer hours. All right. Thanks so much for your update, Greg. Enjoy your breakfast tomorrow, even in solitude.
Yeah, solitude is good. Take care.
So. All right. Thanks very much. At least once in a while, it's fine, right? Okay, yeah. I have to catch up on the the detention center issue. I'm behind because of all the other things that are happening, but I am not entirely certain that there is a direct, violation of some immediately enforceable understanding about the capacity of the detention centers. And I've been seeing the headline over and over in the last day or so that, that in violation of this agreement that ICE had, as they're putting it in the headlines, quietly opened 3 additional detention centers. And I'm wondering whether the chronology is such that they may have been in the works already during the negotiations period. It's not that easy, I don't think. Well, I guess I would say ordinarily it would not be so easy to open up a detention center so quickly if it was a place that, you intended to abide by all applicable laws and be clean, safe, and sanitary. But that's not the purpose. So maybe you could open a slipshod detention center very quickly. That's entirely possible and entirely likely given what they've been doing to date. But we do need to catch up on that one and about 15 other stories. And what else? Greg has just sent me a couple other updates for further consideration. But let's see, being that they come from Nate Silver, I'm not sure that, they probably don't touch on that subject. They would be more likely horse race issues, and they are. Okay, but all very interesting and pretty much reconfirming what we thought as it happens here. I see the Nate Silver tweet letting us know that the top tier is Biden, Harris, and Warren. They're the ones who are both, 1, polling fairly well right now, and 2, have the clearest path to maintain and expand their coalition. Warren's behind the other 2 in endorsements, so I have her a tick behind them overall, but not by much. And I think that's pretty good confirmation of what we've been hearing. I mean, that is rhetorical confirmation anyway of what we've been hearing all along. So not surprising in that sense. All right, well, let's see. It's our 10 o'clock hour now. Time for us to take a 1-minute break and flip over to the other side and open up Pocket and see what else we've been missing along the way. Could it be more detail about Epstein? Sure. Could it be stories that have been flying under the radar because we've been ignoring them in favor of Pedophilia Island? Yes. We'll see. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That's just our little 1-minute break and heading back into the thick of things here in Pocket, and it's coming fast and furious. And no way of really organizing this. I'm going to have to run through lightning rounds and just, let's see, well, at least talk about things that we're aware of and maybe not dive into the entire article here. But let's see. On the radar this morning, still with regard to Epstein, we've got the New York Post telling people, tabloid style, which always counts for extra points in my book, NYPD, New York Police Department, NYPD let convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, they're using the wrong word, pedophile, right? Jeffrey Epstein skip judge-ordered check-ins. So not only was he getting a sweetheart deal in terms of his alleged jail time, but even post-release, he was getting a sweetheart deal. Let's see what they've got here on this one. The New York Post reporting Epstein never once even checked in with city cops in the 8+ years since a Manhattan judge ordered him to do so every 90 days. And the NYPD says it's fine with that. So how do you like that, law and order people? After being labeled a worst of the worst level 3 sex offender in 2011, Epstein should have reported in person to verify his address 34 times before he was arrested Saturday on federal child sex trafficking charges, violating requirements of the state's 1996 Sex Offender Registration Act, including checking in with law enforcement, is a felony all by itself, punishable by up to 4 years in prison for a first offense. So whatever, right? LOL YOLO NM. Subsequent violations carry a sentence of up to 7 years each, but the NYPD hasn't required the billionaire financier, who owns, allegedly, a $77 million Upper East Side townhouse. That's the one I told you that he got. He used his power of attorney over Les Wexner's money to transfer to himself, apparently for $10. NYPD hasn't required him to check in since he registered as a sex offender in New York over the controversial 2008 plea bargain he struck in Florida amid allegations yada, yada. You know the allegations, of course, for which he was convicted. So I think they go beyond allegations at this point. Several current and former high-ranking NYPD officials were shocked to learn from the Post that the department had given Epstein a pass on his periodic check-ins, with one saying it makes no sense. And it doesn't. The NYPD can't modify a court order, a source said. If the judge says he has to report here, he has to report here. Now, where was the judge over the past 8 years? Did he just assume this was going on and that he didn't want any, updates on how's he doing with his reporting? I'm not sure. I guess we could find out who the judge is and ask. Another source said Epstein was supposed to go to SOMU, an acronym for the NYPD's Sex Offender Monitoring Unit, located in the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse at 100 Center Street. If he didn't, then he's in violation, and they could have arrested him, the source said. Why didn't they should have sent them to do the arrest. The NYPD maintains that Epstein, 66, wasn't required to check in with New York cops because he claims his primary residence is a private island, Little St. John, in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So don't bother, right? You just check in wherever. You know what? Don't check in. What an interesting thing. The state Supreme Court Justice Ruth Pickholtz, I guess, is maybe that's the judge involved here, considered and rejected that very argument by defense lawyer Sandra Musumeci, maybe Musumeci, during the January 18, 2011 hearing. She insisted that Epstein wasn't a resident of New York and that his 7-story townhouse at 9 East 71st Street, if you want to, go by and share your eggs with him, for breakfast, I'm saying. Apparently this the largest private residence in Manhattan, as he's so fond of reminding people, was in fact a vacation home at which he had no plans to ever stay longer than a period of 10 days. But he had a girl-sized safe full of nude pictures. Whatever. Pickholtz insisted that Epstein would have to abide by the mandatory reporting requirements for level 3 offenders. I'm sorry he may have to come here every 90 days. Of course, he has a jet. But he can give up his New York home if he doesn't want to come every 90 days. That was the same hearing where, in a highly controversial move, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office tried to argue on Epstein's behalf, believe it or not, that he should be deemed a low-risk level 1 offender. This is a continuing problem with Cy Vance there, who just loves accidentally letting rich offenders off the hook. I don't know why that is. But they showed up to, this is interesting, that the Manhattan DA's office showed up to argue on behalf of the defendant, that don't worry about him. And that would have exempted him from the reporting requirements. The DA's office has said that the prosecutor in that case, Jennifer Gaffney, who quit last year, quote, made a mistake. And that DA Cyrus Vance Jr. was unaware of it at the time, I'm sure. Go to court to argue in favor of letting a pedophile off the hook. I don't know anything about it, says the guy in charge. Sure, right. We believe that one. In March, an NYPD spokeswoman told the Washington Post that Epstein never checked in following Pickholtz's ruling. So that was March. It's July now. Shouldn't we have arrested him earlier? Maybe that is what triggered things. Who knows? Asked repeatedly about that admission this week, the NYPD declined comment. Asked about her ruling, state court spokesman Lucian Chalfin said Pickholtz stands by what was said in court on the record at the hearing and has no further role in any type of enforcement. That's not the court's role. But still, you wonder why they didn't say so the first time. 90 days later, I'd set an alarm. Ring in 90 days and ask. I mean, Atrios would have done it, right? But apparently not. Courts are busy. And Atrios is a loafing idiot. He'll tell you. He's the first one to admit it all the time. I say it, I kid because I love. But he would have set that alarm. He would have done that. And 90 days, is that no, that's only half a Friedman unit. But 90 days was very often a turn the corner unit, I think, back in the Iraq days. Anyway, in addition to verifying a sex offender's address, the 90-day check-ins allow cops to take a new photograph of the offender's appearance in case it's changed so it can be updated online. So it's kind of important. The NYPD cop assigned to monitor Epstein has repeatedly complained to Vance's sex crimes unit that Epstein wasn't in compliance, according to a source familiar with the matter. That's going to hurt. but prosecutors told the cop to merely send Epstein a letter reminding him of his reporting requirement, more strongly worded letters. But this is just endemic up and down the system. You would be justified in wondering aloud every once in a while, how good are Democrats at doing this stuff? I don't know what your other choice is. Certainly putting Republicans in charge of it will only be worse, but you would be justified in asking that question from time to time. A Vance spokesman denied the allegation, saying the NYPD, which is the agency responsible for monitoring SORA compliance, has repeatedly told us that Mr. Epstein was in full compliance with the law. I guess I'd like to see some of those reports. Our office vigorously prosecutes all failure to verify cases. Our prosecutors did not and would not discourage the NYPD from making an arrest, Vance spokesman Danny Frost said. There are records somewhere. Let's pull them all and find out who needs to be fired, impeached, or resign, as the case may be. There's a little bit more to it, but I think you got the gist of it. Interesting story, to say the least. Moving on then. Let's see. We should note for the record, and this is sort of emerging and unclear, but a lot of chatter this morning about a story I have not seen widely reported yet, but USA Today shared with everybody the filings in a court case from another of the previously named accusers of Donald Trump. This time, a woman accusing him of unwanted, forcible kissing. And really, it's been one of the cases that hasn't gotten as much attention. Alva Johnson is the name of the complainant here. Alva Johnson versus Donald Trump is the name of the case. And it's been scattershot in the reporting. All I've seen via Twitter this morning is the USA Today link to the Scribd embedded filings. I assume that there is a story that goes with that, but I'm not in the habit usually of searching through USA Today's website looking for the story. Raw Story has picked up the story based on that, but they don't link to anything but USA Today's embedded imaging of the filing. So it's a little weird. So I'm not sure where we stand on this story, but we should at least acknowledge it. Trump accuser has him on video. This is the new fun part. On video, forcibly kissing her, according to court documents. I guess the other big story out of this story was that there are some allegations from Alva Johnson's attorneys that the video existed, that the defense was in possession of the video. It might be, security video from a Trump property somewhere, and that they went out of their way to alter the video in some ways and to turn it over once they were finally ordered to do so, and only embedded in hours and hours and hours of surrounding video so that you had to dig through this thing and know exactly what you were looking for in order to find the right stuff. So that seems a little questionable, I guess, as well. Here's the Raw Story reporting of it. Sarah K. Burris, who I'm not even kidding. Her middle initial is K. It's not the carryover of yesterday's joke about putting the middle initial K into everybody because of Julie K. Oh crap! I've forgotten her last name. I don't know why I want to say. Oh, I can't even remember now offhand, but you know who we're talking about, and I bet if I jump back and I bet if I looked in Google, it'll come up right away. Julie K. Yeah, is it Julie K. Brown? That's the first hit? Let's see. Yeah, I guess so. Julie K. Brown. All right, that was my first inclination, and I was like, no, you're thinking of the old MTV VJ Downtown Julie Brown, right? Not really Julie, it is Julie Brown. And that's why the K is in there, so you don't confuse her with the VJ, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, Sarah K. Burris has the story reported this way. President Donald Trump allegedly sexually harassed a campaign staffer. That's who Alva Johnson is. Wow, a campaign staffer. You should stay away from that. Although, presumably, he thought she was going to stay quiet about it because she was working for the campaign. That was back in 2016, happened in Florida, allegedly, doing exactly, Sarah says, what he confessed in the Access Hollywood tape. According to the court filings in Alva Johnson v. Donald J. Trump, there is actually a video showing the incident in question. The 8.5 hours of video, this is just jumps right into the quote from the filing, which says, the 8.5 hours of video, I don't think that's how long he was forcibly kissing her. That's the jumbled mess that they turned over, I guess, in Discovery. Also appear to include footage of the rally from Fox 10 Phoenix, Channel 90, a YouTube channel called FRN Now, ABC 7 Suncoast News from Tampa, and others. So it's not just the 8 hours of surrounding security video. It is just stuff that doesn't belong there for any reason that they put into this compilation for no apparent reason other than to confuse people looking through it. I guess if you're ordered to turn over videotape of your client forcibly kissing someone, you say, well, I've got it. I mean, that's an interesting take, right? I mean, that's some serious hardball, right? I have that video. I have to, I guess. I mean, he could have just contemplated not complying. But if I have to comply with the court and turn it over, there's nothing in the order that says I can't also turn over lots of other video. So what an interesting tactic to take the 10 seconds of video that is requested and bury it in 8 hours of essentially video gibberish, and just to make trouble for people. I think that's what they're alleging happened here. So, buried deep in this compilation at 7:39:44, i.e., over 7 hours into the compilation, is a brief video taken on a cell phone, showing Mr. Trump kissing Ms. Johnson inside a campaign RV on August 24th, 2016, as both Armando and I were making preparations for our birthday celebrations, I guess, just as Ms. Johnson alleged. While Ms. Johnson remembered some of the minor details incorrectly, for example, Mr. Trump grabbed her by both shoulders before kissing her and only took her hand after the kiss, it is now undisputable, which they mark with the sick here, I guess it's supposed to be indisputable, that Mr. Trump in fact kissed Ms. Johnson. Trump bragged, of course, on the Access Hollywood bus that he could do whatever he wanted with women because he was a celebrity. Oh yeah, here we go. There's the famous quote from there. I better use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Everyone remembers that. And I guess they went through the video and grabbed this segment here. It's embedded as a YouTube video, 48 seconds long. You know, I don't know if it has any audio or not, but well, I mean, a kiss happened there, but yeah, it doesn't look like a particularly sexual kiss, to be honest with you. I don't know, but I guess unwanted is unwanted, and he doesn't kiss any of the other people. There's lots of them there in the RV. It's not like he cornered her alone and jumped on top of her, but he does, in fact, grab her by the shoulders and kiss her, and she says she didn't want that to happen, so that's all there is to it. So we'll see where this one goes. Just sort of a weird thing, and I'm most interested in it for the tactic of burying the video in 8 hours of other gibberish. It's just sort of interesting. Like, why? How do you even think to do that? They have some very creative evil geniuses working on the legal team over there. All right, so we've acknowledged that has happened. I should also acknowledge my note from listener Bruce McGee, who I guess heard us briefly mentioning the stupid fake Trump family crest that they use for the golf properties, and that therefore ended up on the advertisement for the golf tournament at the Doral Club, since canceled, by the way, sponsored by the local Miami strip club. And we had pondered briefly, what about this stupid crest? And I think we've heard the story before, but we're reminded correctly from Bruce McGee. He stole that crest. That's, I think Greg said, how do you get a family crest anyway? Normally you get it differently, but the New York Times has reported on this in the past, and I think we've discussed it, maybe even read the article, a May 2017 piece. The coat of arms said integrity, now it says Trump. Remember that story? And the backstory of it was that somebody actually had a crest out there that I think at some point Trump actually expressed some interest in purchasing the rights to in some way, but he just ended up stealing it instead. So now is not the time necessarily to spend the time diving into the story, especially as we have done it before. But I don't recall all the really weird and just very telling details of how it happened. But I recall being, not shocked per se because it's Donald Trump, but just sort of taken aback as usual about the brazenness of the theft. But thanks to Bruce for sharing that. I will leave that tab open so I can grab it and you can read that story on background and enjoy all of that later on. Let's see. Man, there's an awful lot. Also now circulating. Let's see. Politico has a story. A new book is out that once again reveals horrible, horrific, awful, disgusting, unbelievable details about just how gross Trump really is. And there's a lot to it, and there's some salacious detail in it, and we ought to discuss some of that. And also out there floating around, maybe it ends up being a Friday story, but I just have to comment. I wanted to yesterday, and I didn't get to it. Let me grab the New York Times headline on it. Audio suggests secret plan for Russians to fund party of Italy's Salvini. And it's being circulated on Twitter with the comment that, oh my gosh, we have this amazing secretly recorded audio of nationalist Italian party leaders essentially accepting the interference of Russia in their elections. And I say it this morning, but we said it yesterday as well, and we didn't get a chance to discuss it on the air, that we have already had this recording from United States officials, and we didn't care. I mean, we cared, and we talked about it, and it was a big story, and it was just one of those amazingly 1 or 2 day things. But I mean, gosh, we've already known this for quite a long time, but it's a new development and happening in a new country, so maybe it renews the story. But the fact that it's happening in Italy actually only makes the first ignoring of the first story that much more egregious. Here we have this tweet from, who is it? Alberto Nardelli. Alberto Nardelli, the Europe editor at BuzzFeed News, tweeting yesterday, "We have obtained a secret audio recording." I guess they were the first ones to get it. New York Times just following up. "We have obtained a secret audio recording of a Moscow meeting between 3 Russian operatives and a close aide to Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini in negotiating a plan to pump money from a Russian oil deal into Salvini's far-right Lega party." And as shocking as that is, I had to note yesterday, look, there already was a secret audio recording of a Washington, D.C. meeting between very recognizable House Republican leaders saying that they were aware of the fact that all over Western Europe and the Western world, in fact, up to and including the United States, the Russians were, in fact, interfering in elections and pouring illicit funds into those elections on behalf of Republicans and other white nationalist, alt-right type parties all over Europe, that they have been doing it for a long time. And the Republicans on tape are caught well, I mean, they're taped. I don't know if they think they're being caught. You're not being caught telling this truth. You're not, I guess caught is the wrong word. They're acknowledging that this is happening, that they had just come out of, remember this audio tape, right? It became famous because of Kevin McCarthy's line in there saying, I swear to God, I think there's two people Putin pays, Trump and was it Rohrabacher that he was accusing of this? And everybody thought that was the amazing part. I thought equally amazing was the setup to all this, which is they're all talking about having just come away from meetings and briefings with the new Ukrainian government, which had basically come to the United States for various reasons, one of which was to inform the leadership of the United States government that the Russians had an active program of using their illicit money, their mob money, to interfere in Western elections, that they had done so in Ukraine, that it was now escalating to open war with Ukraine, but that they were doing it all over Europe. And the people caught discussing that McCarthy thinks Putin pays Trump were just also caught saying, yes, we understand that there is such a program, and it's maniacal, and it's horrific, and they're using this outright lying propaganda to do it, and it's insane, and we should do something about it. And one of them says, the only people doing anything about it is us. And one of the other Republicans are saying, but no, we're actually not. We know that they're doing this stuff, and the United States is doing nothing to stop them. And we aren't even insisting that the United States do anything to stop them. I mean, they might have been saying that we're not doing anything to stop them because they were blaming it on Obama, who was still president at the time. But there's also the fact that they weren't even doing messaging bills of some kind accusing Obama of being, falling asleep on the job there. They just were saying nobody's doing anything and you shouldn't say we are. But they acknowledge the problem and then laugh about thinking that Trump is on the take from this. And this was before he was the nominee, and maybe they thought they were somehow going to be saved from that. But then they all knuckle under to it. Not only that, of course, but the second most famous part is where then Speaker Paul Ryan says, everybody basically swear to keep this secret. Ha, everything's so funny. But seriously, we all know that Republicans are benefiting from this, so let's not say anything. So, man, it's a little bit annoying that it's now 2 years since we heard the tape, and I guess 3+ years since the tape was made, and, we're all, I don't know, I guess we're all running around with our hair on fire, but and we're not even paying attention to what happened here, but this would be the second time they've caught on tape leaders of far-right parties of Western democracies acknowledging that there is such a program and acquiescing to it. And I was wondering, would that ever sink in with people? Will it ever have an impact? And it's hard to know. But, there's a sex scandal going on, so we're paying attention to that instead. All right. We're coming up on our third break. What else do we need to get to? And maybe we'll turn around and do this Politico piece because there's now follow-up pieces from other outlets talking about other juicy details that didn't get tweeted yesterday. So we'll want to run through some of that. Let's see. There's any more news from... we did mention that the British ambassador, who was so honest, essentially, in his assessment of Donald Trump, is being forced out and has resigned. And that, I guess, in the face of threats from people like Boris Johnson, who say, as he stands as a candidate for the leadership of the Conservative Party there in Britain, and may end up finding himself residing in the Prime Minister's residence when all is said and done, that he wouldn't retain the ambassador. He would recall him and replace him were he in charge of British foreign policy. So I suppose that's a pretty clear signal about the future. And I know that ambassadors who are normal people, and I don't know why they would act normally in abnormal times, but would normally be embarrassed by the whole thing, even though it really wasn't. He's done nothing wrong. He's given his honest assessment, and he's largely correct in every possible way about how he assesses Trump, and giving that over to the UK's government that was supposed to remain confidential. I don't know whether they'll ever figure out where that leak was sourced, but whoever did that one ought to be in trouble, but I guess they won't be, because LOL YOLO NM. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Man, there's an awful lot happening, and trying to keep track of all of it is nigh impossible. But I mentioned that I guess the root of several of yesterday and today's analytical articles on the subject comes from a Politico piece, and I guess dealing with this new book. And Tim Alberta put this piece together under this intriguing enough headline. Mother is not going to like this. You know, they're talking about Pence here, but Mother is not going to like this. The 48 hours that almost brought down Trump. Wow, swing and a miss. We didn't get him on that one. The exclusive story of how Trump survived the Access Hollywood tape. Sounds pretty interesting, right? So let me set things up by reading the first couple paragraphs, pardon me, of this, I guess, I don't. Is it a review of the book, or I don't know what you would call it exactly, but it's certainly based on this book. And then a couple of the reaction pieces offered for their value in mining either the story about the book or the book itself, I'm not sure which, for the today's versions of the most salacious nuggets. Tomorrow there'll be more and worse, I am sure. Begins this way. One by one, they had trickled out of the conference room on the 25th floor of Trump Tower. It was Friday, October 7th, 2016. Maybe this is an excerpt. Did Tim Alberta write the book? Is that what this is? Because it's done in a very literary style here, so it suggests to me that it's excerpts. Okay. So one by one, they had trickled out of the conference room on the 25th floor of Trump Tower. It was Friday, October 7th, 2016, 2 days before the second presidential debate, and the Republican nominee's brain trust had spent the morning running a carefully simulated rehearsal session. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, playing the role of Hillary Clinton, was stationed adjacent to his opponent at a conference table. Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus, acting as the moderator, was positioned directly across from Donald Trump. The rest of the observers, Press Secretary Hope Hicks, how does she do it? Campaign Chief Executive Steve Bannon, he of the Seth Rich conspiracy theory, Campaign Manager Kellyanne Conway, Deputy Campaign Manager David Bossie, son-in-law Jared Kushner, and the nominee's children, among a few others, listened critically, offering occasional feedback. Hicks had left the room first. How did she do that? The rest of the team, more glued to their smartphones than usual, began taking turns excusing themselves. Priebus, Christie, and Trump pushed onward with the debate prep. Finally, looking up and realizing that it was only the three of them remaining, Priebus paused the proceedings. Okay, he told Trump, when the entire staff leaves the room, something's up. Trump hadn't noticed either. Now he glanced from side to side, and to his right, through the glass-plated doors, he could see members of his team huddled outside the conference room, whispering in hushed tones. "Yeah," Trump said, breaking from his practiced debate cadence and barking toward the door. "What the hell's going on out there?" A few agonizing moments passed before the door opened. In walked Hicks, carrying a stapled packet of papers. She handed them silently to Trump. A former Ralph Lauren model known for her sharp looks and confident mien. How did she do it? Hicks was now ashen-faced. Trump eyed the top sheet and began reading. "Uh-huh," he said, flipping to the next page. Priebus was growing impatient and fearful. "What is it?" he said. "Tell me what's happening." Trump ignored him, of course, as he usually did, I'm sure. Turning to a new page, he scanned the print and then stopped suddenly, his expression and tone shifting at once. He looked up at Hicks. "This doesn't sound like me." Did that sound like him? I don't know. Priebus raised his voice in uncharacteristic fashion. "Someone tell me something, please." No one's paying attention to that guy, ever. Trump looked at him, put the packet on the table, and slid it across. The party chairman began to read, the room now filling around him with the rest of the team. They had all seen it, an email exchange with Washington Post reporter David Farenthold, who seems to be at the center of everything, who claimed to have, I didn't even realize he uncovered this. Anyway, David Farenthold, who claimed to have an old audio recording of Trump making exceedingly lewd remarks about women and boasting of his ability to get away with sexual assault. David Farenthold had sent over, it doesn't say David the second time, Farenthold had sent over the alleged quotes and was requesting comment from the campaign for a story that would run later that day. "Wow, this isn't good," Priebus said, his eyes fixed on a single line. "This is really, really bad." The group was paralyzed with silence. Finally, Kushner piped up. "You know, I don't think it's all that bad." Amazing. Always the optimist. "Jared, what are you talking about?" Priebus said, burying his head in his hands. "This is as bad as it gets." Trump, talking to no one in particular, repeated himself. "This doesn't sound like me." Two of the nominee's advisors spoke up in support of that theory. Conway and Bossie vouched for Trump. Why? Saying they had never heard him use any such language to describe women. This wasn't his style. They'd been around him for 10 seconds, so, only as a candidate. Priebus was struck by an impossible bolt of optimism. He told Trump that maybe it was all a mistake. He recalled the time he was misquoted after a speech when the chairman had used the phrase, "hates us," and a reporter wrote that he had said, "racist." Tape recordings were tricky things, Priebus said. Maybe this entire thing was a foul-up. Just then, Bossie pulled out his iPad. Farenthold, the Post reporter, had sent the audio file. With the nominee's team clustered around him, Bossie pressed play. They listened, and then Trump spoke up. "Well," he said, "that's me." "Oh, you don't say." The room fell hushed. It was a moment of humility and vulnerability, recalls Conway. That's a good spin for it. He legitimately did not remember saying that. How odd. The story goes on from there, of course, and you know what was on the tape. What I find interesting, or I guess what I'll do now is, let's jump over to other people's digestion of the story and picking out their favorite parts of it. I have Greg Sargent writing it up this way under this headline: "New disclosures about lewd Trump video reveal his mastery of the GOP." So let's head directly to that analysis. President Trump's Labor Secretary, Alexander Acosta, is under intense pressure to resign over his past role in a soft plea deal for financier Jeffrey Epstein, now that Epstein has been indicted on child sex trafficking charges. It's not clear whether Acosta will survive, but Trump does seem to be trying to keep him on board to see if it's possible to weather the resulting political storm. What does that have to do with anything? Let's see if we make this transition here. In this context, it's fitting that a new account has emerged of Trump's own biggest brush with political death over his own sexual misconduct, the controversy over the Access Hollywood tape, in which Trump boasted of repeatedly committing sexual assault with impunity. The new account of that affair, which shows that to a greater degree than previously known, leading Republicans privately thought Trump had disqualified himself, only to abruptly fall in line behind him, is deeply revealing as to Trump's grasp of today's GOP and, more broadly, is depressingly symbolic of today's culture of elite impunity. Yes, as you probably guessed from the title that they chose for the Politico piece, Mother won't like this, Mother's not going to like this. There was a problem with the evangelical Pence. Maybe I won't be able to remain as your running mate. There was this brief moment during which he was actually considering dropping out or refusing to go along with things or making no public appearances on behalf of Trump. It got that bad. And then all of a sudden they all said, you know what? Power. Let's just grab it and not care about anything and have no souls. All right. So moving on with Greg Sargent's piece here. Acosta has defended his handling of the Epstein case as a U.S. attorney in Florida, in which Epstein ended up doing a scant 13 months for sex crimes, arguing it was the best prosecutors could do. But calls for his resignation are mounting. The Miami Herald, which revealed many questionable details about the case, just excoriated Acosta for failing to show an ounce of sympathy for the vulnerable girls Epstein sexually exploited. Trump says he feels very badly for Acosta. Two senior officials tell the New York Times that support for Acosta could quickly disappear if more emerges. And CNN reports that Acosta's fate may turn on what Trump thinks of the media coverage of the controversy. All of this basically means Trump is trying to see whether he can keep Acosta on, which brings us to the new revelations about the Access Hollywood tape. Politico magazine has published an excerpt, there's the answer, from a forthcoming book about Trump and the GOP by journalist Tim Alberta. In it, Alberta reports the following. First, after the tape became public, scores of top Republican lawmakers, donors, and activists, far more than did so publicly, privately urged then-Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus to push Trump out and replace him with Vice President Pence at the top of the ticket. This includes then House Speaker Paul Ryan, which I guess explains the continuing animosity that continued into the Trump presidency. Pence hunkered down and prayed with his wife Karen, who furiously warned him that she would no longer appear in public if Pence remained Trump's running mate. Pence hinted to advisors that he might have to stop campaigning with Trump. You know how much sway he gives to his wife, which is not at all, I think, unusual among married couples. But eventually he must have convinced her, you know what, shut the hell up. We could become very powerful. And she said, you know what, we really could. That's what's so interesting. And that's what Greg is getting at here. But the key revelation is what happened next. At the next debate with Hillary Clinton, Trump ferociously attacked back, blasting Bill Clinton's history with women and even threatening to unleash law enforcement on Hillary Clinton, saying that with him as president, Clinton would, quote, be in jail. Even Jeffrey Epstein wasn't in jail, but she was going to be, you see. Alberta recounts what then transpired. Within 48 hours, the bleeding had stopped. Republicans ceased their calls for his withdrawal. Pence dutifully returned to the stump, and his campaign went on as though nothing had happened. With this, Trump displayed a remarkable, if perhaps instinctual, grasp of how to survive in today's GOP. While he did issue a video apology, what really rescued Trump was going ferociously on the attack, which crucially included threatening to put the real enemy in prison. Timothy L. O'Brien, who wrote a biography of Trump, told me this gut instinct on Trump's part goes back to his earliest days and is a function of his worldview, which O'Brien described as eat or be eaten, which previously known as kill or be killed. But okay, with Trump it's about eating. Trump's view that life has only winners and losers comes directly from his father, O'Brien said. Fred Trump came through the rough and tumble of early to mid-20th century real estate industry and clubhouse Democratic politics in New York. It was a ruthless eat-or-be-eaten world. Fred channeled that into Donald with full force, O'Brien continued, adding that Donald Trump came out of the gates with this predatory worldview, wedded to the substantial amount of money that his father gave to him. That inherited fortune, of course, was enhanced and protected by massive and extensive father and son tax fraud, and also father and daughter tax fraud, which is why his sister had to resign finally as a federal judge, which again nobody seems to remember, but okay. Speaking of predators, Epstein, who clawed his way into the jet-setting global elites from very humble New York beginnings, just as Fred Trump did, stands accused of an extraordinary array of crimes, including creating a network of girls for him to abuse at will, some of them potentially being underage. That is a very gentle way of putting it. As Michelle Goldberg argues, Epstein's light sentence the first time, combined with the fact that the architect of that sentence remains as labor secretary, exposes a culture in which the very rich often enjoy impunity for the most loathsome of crimes. That culture of impunity, of course, involves both major parties and many industries outside of politics. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has signaled that Democrats will not take investigative action against Acosta, a baffling and inexplicable decision. Still, Democrats have of late been more aggressive in policing sexual misconduct in their ranks than Republicans have been, and Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Schumer have called on Acosta to resign, something we're not hearing from any Republicans. No big deal, but okay. Calling on, that never works. In all kinds of ways, of course, Trump himself demonstrates how deeply the culture of impunity has penetrated the GOP. We've seen bottomless self-dealing and a refusal to show minimal transparency on his business holdings, extensive and potentially criminal efforts to derail the Russia investigation, the refusal to hold the Saudis accountable for the dismembering of Jamal Khashoggi, maximal resistance to any and all congressional oversight, the turning loose of Attorney General William Barr on his political critics, Acosta's potential survival, and so much more, much of it with nary a peep from Republicans. What Trump seems to have developed here is a kind of full saturation, totally unabashed flaunting of impunity as something to be worn as a badge of honor. In retrospect, that remarkable closing of ranks behind Trump, despite the lewd video, foreshadowed much of what we're seeing now. And, that about sums it up for me. There's more, of course. There is another Washington Post take on this one from Josh Dawsey, writing, new book details how Republican leaders learn to stop worrying and love Trump. And I think I grabbed this one for the knuckling under of Speaker Paul Ryan was, I think, what grabbed attention here. Few people have more power in President Trump's White House, this is also interesting, than Madeleine Westerhout. I don't know how she says her first name, Madeline Westerhout, his executive assistant who controls access to the Oval Office, delivers the president's marker-scribbled messages, sends orders to top military officials, prints emails and articles to show Trump, and seeks to keep a tight grip on his schedule. But she was not always a staunch supporter of the president. On election night, Westerhout, then a Republican National Committee aide, broke down crying, inconsolable over Trump winning the election. Talk about your knuckling under there, right? To the amusement of her RNC peers, she was later chosen to be the president's executive assistant and now sits just outside the Oval Office, writes Tim Alberta in American Carnage, the name of the book, actually, a copy of which was obtained by the Washington Post ahead of its scheduled release Tuesday. That makes it sound like super mysterious. Did he not give it to you? Curious. The book is filled with vivid details and on-the-record quotes from prominent Republican officials and includes an interview with Trump, who gleefully takes credit for the GOP's shift while standing over the Oval Office desk and waving a poll that shows his approval numbers are soaring from his State of the Union. Can there be a question, Trump says, smirking, when asked by Alberta if he is transitional or transformational? Honestly, can there even be a question? The Tea Party still exists, except now it's called Make America Great Again. The Republican Party was in big trouble. I brought the party back. The Republican Party is strong. The Republican Party is strong, he says, before pausing. According to the book, they've got to remain faithful and loyal. You know how he is about that. The book details how many Republicans who once criticized Trump quickly changed their tune after his election, striking a devil's bargain with a man Alberta describes in the book as behaving in a way that is dishonest, amoral, narcissistic, and uninformed. I think he got that largely correct, don't you? Westerhout now tells others she would do almost anything for Trump, and he calls her My beautiful beauty. Oh, my God. I just vomited in my own mouth here. It's crazy. Not only is it just disgusting and demeaning to call her my beautiful beauty, but I mean, there's 3 words in here, and 2 of them are beautiful. I mean, my beautiful beauty. That's wow. Anyway, Sean Spicer, depicted in the book as trying to stack a South Carolina 2016 debate crowd against Trump, and for Florida Senator Marco Rubio, back in the day, right, a charge Spicer calls 100% false, is most famous for his pugilistic performances as White House press secretary. Reince Priebus, the RNC chairman who pushed for Trump to drop from the ticket before serving briefly as his chief of staff, now gives lucrative speeches deciphering the president to corporate bigwigs and serves as a Trump whisperer. If he was really any good at it, of course, he'd still be chief of staff. But what the hell? Let's hire him anyway, right? There's no failing out of this group. These guys have all convinced themselves that to be successful and keep their jobs, they need to stand by Trump. Representative Justin Amash, who recently left the GOP over his differences with Trump, said in an interview for the book, but Trump won't stand with them as soon as he doesn't need them. He's not loyal. They're very loyal to Trump, but the second he thinks it's to his advantage to throw someone under the bus, he'll be happy to do it. Alberta dings Vice President Pence and others for seeking to defend Trump as an evangelical and humble man behind the scenes seeking to help his country, while casting aside their core convictions. He reports that the vice president's wife, Karen Pence, did not want to appear in public with her husband after the Access Hollywood tape, and that Pence disagreed with Trump on many key issues from immigration to trade. Now, Pence's oldest friends joke about whether Trump has blackmail material on him. Pence's talent for bootlicking, he was nicknamed the bobblehead by Republicans on Capitol Hill for his solemn nodding routine whenever Trump spoke, were at their most obscene during meetings at the White House, Alberta writes. Mick Mulvaney is cast as ambitious and clear-eyed about Trump before the election, telling fellow lawmakers that he read The Art of the Deal and could play to Trump's ego while blocking his worst inclinations. We're not going to let Donald Trump dismantle the Bill of Rights, Mulvaney said to Alberta in 2016, while he was still a congressman from South Carolina. For 5.5 years, every time we got to the floor and tried to push back against an overreaching president, we got accused of being partisan at best and racist at worst. When we do it against a Republican president, maybe people will see that it was principled objection in the first place. Because now, as the president's acting chief of staff, Mulvaney says to others that he lets Trump be Trump. Senator Ted Cruz, who basked in Trump's glory during a large rally that helped him win a tight Texas race down the stretch of the 2018 midterms, once felt differently about the president. Cruz told confidants there was no way in hell, that's a quote, no way in hell he was prepared to subjugate himself to Trump in front of tens of millions of viewers, Alberta writes. History isn't kind to the man who holds Mussolini's jacket, Cruz told friends in 2016. Even later, he bemoaned Trump for seeking to end birthright citizenship, saying he was trying to cost the party seats. Representative Jim Jordan, you remember him, told Alberta in June 2016 that he wishes the Republican-controlled Congress could have done things differently to, quote, avoid creating this environment that was conducive to someone like Donald Trump becoming the nominee, unquote. Jordan is now on Fox News defending Trump more than almost any other of the president's allies. Perhaps no one has had a more tortured relationship with the president than former House Speaker Paul Ryan, who went from wanting to abandon Trump after the release of the Access Hollywood tape to working to enact his agenda after the election, all while doing his best to avoid commenting on his tweets and controversial statements. Alberta reports that Trump berated Ryan over a 2018 spending bill because it didn't include funding for his border wall, but then said he would sign it if Ryan were to give him time to build suspense on Twitter. What? Ryan agreed, amazingly enough, and then publicly sang the president's praises after the meeting. When President Trump one Saturday in early 2017 accused the Obama administration of tapping his phones during the election, he called Chief of Staff Reince Priebus to ask his opinion of the pre-dawn tweet. A slumbering, confused Priebus opened his phone and then called Ryan, a fellow Wisconsinite and longtime ally. Paul, what the hell's going on? What the hell is he talking about? Ryan woke up, read the tweet, and burst into maniacal, punch-drunk laughter. Thanks for your help there, Ryan. Now out of office and trading his power suits for a blue vest, Ryan is back to critiquing Trump in unflattering terms in conversations with Alberta, who writes, the former speaker could not stand the idea of another 2 years with the president and saw retirement as the escape hatch. Well, we'll hang you for it eventually. We've gotten so numbed by it all, Ryan says. Not in government, but where we live our lives. We have a responsibility to try and rebuild. Don't call a woman a horse face. Don't cheat on your wife. Don't cheat on anything. Be a good person. Set a good example. He's done so well at that himself. Ryan depicts Trump as uneducated about the government. I know that. I told myself I got to have a relationship with this guy and help him get his mind right, Ryan recalls, because I'm telling you, he didn't know anything about the government. I wanted to scold him all the time. Ryan says he sees the presidency getting worse, with Trump determined to govern and campaign on his terms, rejecting calls from other Republicans to moderate his message in 2020. Those of us around him really helped to stop him from making bad decisions all the time. Imagine thinking you came away looking good out of this. We helped him make much better decisions. Has anybody seen better ones, by the way? Which were contrary to kind of what his knee-jerk reaction was. Now I think he's making some of these knee-jerk reactions. Now that I'm gone, he's really gone to hell, apparently. And Alberta's telling Trump calls Ryan a, quote, effing Boy Scout. Why do you hate Boy Scouts? And get such a good reception at their jamboree. By the way, they should read that to the kids, right? Alberta traces the ascent of Trump to the final stretch of the George W. Bush presidency and describes an elitist, bloated Republican Party that had won elections by minimizing differences with Democrats but accomplishing little for the working class, not that they were ever going to, they hate them, and embracing more liberal immigration plans, unpopular wars, and financial bailouts. The first chapter explains in detail how the rise of former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, beloved by the base but detested by the establishment, presaged Trump, and how Barack Obama brought out the worst in many of the so-called forgotten voters, and how many in the GOP did not see it all coming. Even though we told you. Republicans were blissfully ignorant of the discontent simmering below the surface, he writes. He recounts a scene where Bush, while meeting with advisors in his second term, said he was worried about protectionism, isolationism, and nativism. These isms, Bush told his team, are going to eat us alive. He recounts Bush even asking conservative radio hosts at a 2008 meeting to, quote, go easy on the new guy, referring to his successor, Barack Obama, because he worried the isms would drive the opposition to Obama. And, Ian Reifowitz has told us what happened with that. Wow. Anything else to discover from this that we can fit in before it's time to wrap up? Probably not, but, pretty amazing. And, it closes with an interesting quote. I don't think anybody heard him do this one or circulated it anyway. After a 2018 rally in Missouri where Trump soaked in the adulation of the crowd, this is the part he likes, right? He hates the rest of it. He screams into the night, I effing love this job. Wow. So I figured there would be video of that somewhere, but I guess I haven't seen it circulate. Maybe you have. Anyway, time for us to wrap up and hand things over to Justice Putnam to carry on the Netroots radio programming day. Those of you who are at Netroots Nation might find it very interesting to tune into Netroots Radio to find out what's going on our side of things. Hope you're enjoying the day. Moving on maybe to the second panel by now. Or maybe you already did it an hour ago and moving on to your third. Or already thinking about lunch. That's possible too. We'll be back tomorrow. And like I said, we still have a giant raft of stories to share with you here that have been sitting in pocket. More details will doubtless emerge as people make their way through this book and pick out their favorite parts. Let's see, anything else that we absolutely positively have to blurt out before we close things out? I got a couple of really wild threads to share. I guess we can probably do it tomorrow. from some of the usual suspects who float just a little bit below the surface out there. Big followings on Twitter. It'll probably take a few days before what they're discovering starts bubbling up into the mainstream press, so maybe that makes for a good Friday show to prepare you for the weekend and see if we haven't nailed it come Monday. All right. Justice Putnam is up next to nail various other stories. Let's see what he's got on tap in his preview here. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy up next. Starting off in his Bistro Cafe, the Trump team is rocked by new revelations in the Access Hollywood scandal. Sounds like he's been reading a little bit of what we've been reading, and it will be great to get his take on what he thinks the juiciest bits are. Then on the rest of the menu, ICE is not only ignoring Congress, but is also helping businesses profit off of Trump's cruelty. Duncan Hunter was humiliated in court by his own lawyer, and House Republicans demand Pelosi hold a Trump trade deal vote before Trump has even submitted it. Gee whiz, that sounds backwards.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
News from overseas includes the Matteo Salvini story that we hinted at and some more in-depth coverage of that coming. But get this. The Sistine Chapel choir director has resigned after allegations of fraud and embezzlement. I didn't even know you could embezzle from a chapel, but I guess you can. Stay tuned to find out how.